Andrew met Flora at a fairly mature age. They were more than 15 years apart, and his friends laughed at his choice. It was his first wife who was the most amused. They managed to stay on good terms after the divorce, and he couldn't help but share his feelings with her. The woman laughed in his face when she heard the age of her new fling, and Andrew held a grudge against her for it. He was uncomfortable with the fact that his sweetheart was being evaluated in advance, without even getting to know her personally. Flora was 29, and she was the last of her friends who had not yet married. So when she met Andrew, she did not hesitate to accept his advances. Her mother did not approve of her choice, just nodded silently, her lips pressed together. An elderly woman also did not like the difference in age between the two lovers, but she would not tell her daughter about it. She could see how she was suffering from the lack of a couple. Flora plunged headlong into the relationship. She tried her best to be nice to keep Andrew near her, but he wouldn't leave. He was so much in love with Flora that he didn't notice any flaws in her. Nor did he notice when, after 3 years of marriage, his wife found a lover. The woman did not plan the affair. She met Bruno by chance. She was with friends at a restaurant where he was hosting an event. The man approached Flora several times, complimented her, and begged for her phone number. Flora was pleased with the attention from Bruno. Her girlfriends joked that if she did give him her number, they would tell her husband everything. Finally, she surrendered to his pressure and gave him the cherished numbers while her girlfriends were out of sight. After that, Bruno left and didn't make himself known for another week. Flora had already managed to forget about her suitor when the man finally called and asked to see her. No. She firmly answered Bruno's request. Why not? I thought there was a spark between us. The woman could hear from her voice that the man was smiling. You imagined it, she said politely, and after saying goodbye, she dropped the call. Bruno made no attempt to communicate with Flora. He kept writing and calling her, trying to win her affection. When she first received a huge bouquet of flowers from him at work, she stunned so beautifully for her not even Andrew. The woman changed her anger for mercy and became more favorable to her suitor. Andrew noticed that her spouse was constantly talking to someone on the phone, giggling over some messages every now and then. He only once asked who was texting her, and Flora told him that she was chatting with her friends in a public chat room. The man was blinded by his love for his wife and didn't even realize she was cheating on him. At first, Flora was embarrassed, and she constantly hid her phone and tried not to communicate with Bruno when she was at home. But when she realized that her spouse was not trying to find out anything, she relaxed a little, and then she completely let her guard down. One by one, the bouquets kept arriving at Flora's workplace. Employees marveled at how she and her husband have a great relationship. Someone frankly invited her and told her about it directly. Flora embarrassedly smiled and blushed. None of the colleagues knew that the flowers were not a present from her husband, and it was because of the embarrassment for the received presents that the woman agreed to meet her admirer for dinner. Flora told her husband about the meeting with her friends, and she went on a date after work. Andrew reluctantly let his beloved go. He liked their tradition of spending Friday nights together, watching movies and sharing impressions of the past week. Contrary to what his friends and ex-wife predicted, Andrew and Flora always had plenty to talk about. They enjoyed talking for hours on end. The man was pleased to know that he had been right about his beloved and had not made a mistake in his choice. After that meeting at dinner, it was as if Flora's head had been blown off with love. Never before had she experienced such an all-consuming feeling that burst from the inside. Now she clearly understood she had never loved Andrew. And she had married him for the most part only because she too wanted to be someone's wife and to communicate with her friends as equals without feeling the sympathetic looks on her face. Now that she had Bruno, it was like everything had been turned upside down. Her whole previous life had seemed like a dream. Flora felt as if she was just now able to breathe. Andrew's change in his wife I noticed immediately. He didn't hear the first calls. The man thought he was imagining it all, and he was imagining non-existent problems for himself. But when he suddenly realized that their married life in bed was rapidly approaching the 0 mark, Andrew realized he could start to panic. "Darling, are you having problems at work?" Patiently, he asked his wife. "Everything is fine," she smiled. The smile was fake and did not make Andrew or herself happy. "Maybe you're mad at me. What's going on between us?" The man tried to get at the truth. Once again, his wife smiled at him, stroked his cheek, and said that nothing had changed between them, and that Andrew had no reason to ask such questions. Lies again. Andrew felt it with all his gut, but he couldn't explain it. This vile, sticky feeling of deception enveloped him, preventing him from thinking straight. He noticed that his wife was receiving a message from some man. Flora relaxed completely, stopped hiding her phone altogether, dropping it anywhere. She knew that Andrew would not think of checking it, and she was not afraid of being discovered. Andrew did not have the password to his wife's phone, and he was never able to find out who this mysterious Bruno was and what he wanted from another man's wife. He did not talk about what he had seen, deciding to observe Flora a little more. Flora worked as a manicurist in a salon. It was her hobby and brought her a good income. There was no shortage of clients, and her husband was terribly proud of her and her skills. On reflection, Andrew sent his ex-wife Sveta to investigate. He honestly told her his suspicions, and Sveta agreed to help him. She would not say that she had warned him, that she had predicted that this was how it would end. The woman nodded silently and promised to find out what she could. When Flora saw that her husband's ex-wife had come to see her, she was surprised that Sveta had never been her client. Flora could not refuse her and went to work. Sveta kept on babbling, now telling about herself, now asking a lot of different questions of her companion. "What beautiful flowers you have. 3 bouquets, smiled the client. Andrew sent them. "Is he guilty or what?" Sveta conspiratorially winked at Flora. Oh yes, it is he." Reluctantly and confused, Flora answered. When his ex-wife called Andrew and asked him why he had sent her 3 expensive bouquets, he did not understand what she was talking about. The woman repeated the question about the flowers and, laughing, asked where he had done so much wrong. By default, on the other end of the line, she realized that Andrew had not sent his wife anything. He thanked Sveta for her help and hung up. In the evening, when his wife returned from work, sad, Andrew was already waiting for her at home. He ordered food from his favorite restaurant, Flora, and bought wine. It seemed to him that time stretched on endlessly and the drink in the bottle was endless. Finally, he realized that his wife had become confused and her tongue was loosened. He asked her straight out, "Who is this Bruno? Whose messages came so often on her phone and whose bouquets are at Flora in the workplace?" There was a scandal, in which the woman first tried to defend her case, and then suddenly bursting into tears admitted to her husband that she really was cheating on him. "I love him," she whispered, choking back her tears. It was a blow below the belt. At the moment of her confession, the man felt as if the earth was slipping from under his feet, and it became difficult to breathe. And Flora kept talking and talking. "Shut up," shouted Andrew and slammed his fist on the table. The wife jumped up and clutched her mouth with her palm, crying even more in fear. They ended the evening in silence and in separate rooms. That night, Andrew could not sleep. He lost count of how many times he went out to smoke and how many times he tried to burst into his wife's room and continue the fight. The pain his beloved had caused him spread and suffocated him. By morning, Andrew realized that there was no point in keeping Flora around. Their marriage must be consummated. Flora moved out of her husband's house before the divorce was official. Bruno took her in and showered her with love and care. The woman felt guilty for doing so badly to her spouse. She kept thinking that she should not have even agreed to marry, knowing that she did not love Andrew at all. Several times Flora tried to talk to him, to apologize for everything, but her ex-spouse wouldn't even listen to her. Flora understood that nothing she could say would change anything.